Sorry that's taken a bit longer than usual for me to post an update. Admittedly, after the possession incident, I've been having a bit of an existential crisis. Oh well, life goes on, right? Though it would be better if I could go to sleep without being petrified by the idea of waking up with someone else in control of my body, or being near tears with terror at the thought of dying and simply not existing anymore. You know, normal, healthy thoughts. On an unrelated note, did you all know that there are vampires that feed exclusively on goats? Unfortunately, Connie and I had to learn that the hard way, so if any of you keep goats, consider this a heads up to keep an eye out. I was making coffee when I heard her squealing in a way that instantly made my heart race, followed by the sounds of my garbage cans clattering to the ground. I immediately abandoned what I was doing, grabbed my broom, and charged out. At first glance, the thing chasing her appeared to be some sort of medium-sized dog, until the dog slowly arose to stand on two legs. Patches of wiry, brown fur stood out from leathery black skin. A long, forked tongue snaked out of its mouth. It hissed, sounding more reptilian than canine. Definitely not a dog. Despite the fear gripping my heart, I managed to smack it over the head with my broom. The creature growled. I hit it again, staggering back when it took a step towards me. Its snout wrinkled, showing off two fangs as long as my middle fingers. The creature hissed again, and I stumbled back just as it took a swipe at me with one of its claws. I swung the broom at it again, only for its jaws to clamp down onto the handle of the broom, yanking its head side to side with a vicious growl. Quickly, I turned and snatched Connie up while the creature was briefly distracted with chewing out my broom, making a beeline to the door. I didn't look back when I heard the broom's handle snap, followed by the creature growling low in its throat as its paws pounded in the gravel after us. I reached the door, pulling it closed just as the creature launched itself at us, its body slamming into the door. I pressed my back against it, hoping my meager strength would be enough to keep it from busting through. An insipid thought floated from the back of my mind. I just bought this house. My breath came in quick shudders, pressing harder against the door as I felt another impact that made my entire body quake as I tried to keep that thing out. The deadbolt. Would that help? Without moving from my position, I turned it just as the creature threw itself at the door again. Oddly enough, I think it did help a little. It scratched at the door, its claws screeching against it, not unlike nails on a chalkboard, making my teeth clench in reflex. I didn't budge, not even to cover my ears. This carried on for about 10 minutes, until finally the infernal scraping stopped. I stayed where I was, afraid to move away. Once I was sure that the creature was finally gone, I slumped to the ground, catching my breath. I hadn't noticed that Connie and Siri had been hiding. Both came out, Siri from behind the couch, Connie from under the kitchen table, and apprehensively crept towards me. Hands trembling, I tentatively reached out to pet them both. There was blood on Connie's neck. With a damp towel, I gently wiped it away, revealing a long but shallow scratch on her neck. It didn't look bad, but I made an emergency appointment with the vet anyway, telling them that she had a run-in with a coyote. They were able to get her before I went into work. Thankfully, they confirmed that the cut wasn't too bad. I just had to make sure that she didn't scratch at it. Connie had been shaken up after the incident, but by the time we got back home from the vet, she was her typical bouncy self. Siri followed her around, headbutting the little goat affectionately. She must have been as worried about Connie as I was. On my way to work, I began to ponder on the details for my second wish. Between the possession and Connie almost being eaten, I clearly needed some sort of protection, not just for myself, but for my animals. I was so tired. Between the lack of sleep and the stress I'd been under for the past month, I was so drained that all of the caffeine in the world would not be enough to make me feel like a functioning person. Oh, by the way, I'm still pretending that I don't have a voice at work. It just seemed easier than explaining to my other coworkers that my voice magically came back after making out with our IT guy. Maybe that's not the best way to handle the situation, but that's what I'm going with. When I arrived, I noticed Rami was kneeling on the ground, doing surgery on someone's PC while the owner of the computer rambled about something the djinn clearly did not care to hear about. He looked annoyed enough, so I figured it'd be best not to interrupt him. Truthfully, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to say anyway. When I ran into Rami during break, he revealed that the water had been shut off in half of the units in his apartment building without warning. When he and the other affected residents called the landlord, the jackass claimed that the price for utilities had went up over the weekend, which no one was informed of, and they'd all underpaid. I'm gonna put a curse on him later, Rami said in his typical nonchalant manner. I imagine that early onset erectile dysfunction will humble him a bit. In the meantime, do you mind if I come by and use your shower after work? I agreed. Not only did I want to be nice, but I also wanted to discuss the wish. And if I'm being honest, I didn't want to be alone. On the way to my house, the djinn had a seat all the way back, sunglasses in the pocket of his shirt, eyes closed. I wasn't sure if he was awake until he spoke. You haven't been sleeping much lately, have you? I was taken aback. Was it that obvious? I stammered. No, I'm sleeping. He opened one eye. Not very well. I hesitated, taking one hand off of the wheel in a shrug. I mean, I've been having some strange thoughts while laying there, but it's... I cut myself off with a deep sigh. It felt pointless. Everything felt pointless. Both eyes were open now. What strange thoughts? When Rami asked that, I could have sworn that I heard concern in his voice, but I must have imagined it. Swallowing back the lump in my throat, I took a deep breath, thinking carefully about what to say. I wanted to say so much. I wanted to spill my guts about how even the slightest of noises makes me flinch, about how terrified I am at the thought of being trapped inside my own body again, about how the idea of some horrible creature killing my pets makes me feel sick. But all I could get out was, I'm scared. Don't ask me why, but tears came to my eyes after those two words. I kept my attention on the road despite feeling the unmistakable weight of Rami's stare. I forced myself to breathe as calmly as possible. I wasn't going to have a mental breakdown. Everything was fine. Well, we're just going to have to change that, won't we? He finally said. All I could do was nod in response. The rest of the drive was silent. As soon as he got out of the PT Cruiser, Rami narrowed his eyes at the broken broom sitting in my driveway. Before he could say anything, I told him. Connie and I had an encounter. According to Google, it was something called a Chupacabra. She's okay, but it was an experience. He nodded, his eyes scanning the trees in the lakeshore, his expression unreadable. Was there something out there? Something that wanted to hurt us? I hurried to unlock my door. Once safely inside, I stammered. About my second wish. Well, I didn't have time to write anything out. No need. We'll talk it over, Rami interrupted, saving me from having to trip over what I wanted to say even more. Once we were settled on the couch, I explained that I wanted protection for myself, Connie, and Siri. Maybe he felt bad for me, maybe he saw how desperate I was getting, but whatever his reasons were, he seemed sincere when he advised me on how to phrase the wish. The best thing for you would be to ask that you, your animals, and your home be made safe from any being that means to do you harm. It would cover all of your bases and establish your house as an impenetrable space. I thought about it, then overthought it. So these entities won't stop coming after me? It'll just stop them from hurting me? Is there any way that we can stop the attacks entirely? Rami gave me a small smile. There is. You'd have to forget all about me. Completely distance yourself from me. The memory of the churl telling me that she could smell Rami on me came to mind. I had thought that getting rid of Matthew and avoiding the churl would be enough to make the madness in my life simmer down, but clearly it was more complicated than that. Just being associated with Rami puts a target on my back. Rami continued, his eyes locking with mine. If that's what you choose to do, I'll have no choice but to grant it. At the end of the day, it's your wish. I'm going to be selfish and ask that you don't, but ultimately, the choice is yours. I'd said in one of my comments from the last update that my feelings towards Rami are complicated. To summarize, he is both the best and worst thing that's ever happened to me. Since I've met him, I've experienced horrible things that I never believed could happen outside of folklore. He's dangerous and self-serving. Everything he does has some sort of ulterior motive. But at the same time, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel isolated. I know that the cons should outweigh the pros. I know that I should value my own life over a relationship that has only lasted for about a month. I should know better. My mind raced. Even if I wished to remove every inhuman thing from town or to be completely unnoticeable to them, that would include him. And even if I chose to forget about him and all that I'd experienced, would that actually guarantee my safety? Would the churl conveniently forget about how I pitted her against Matthew or how Rami gleefully tormented her on my behalf? Would the Chupacabra forget about Connie? And what would happen to my third wish? Far too many unanswered questions. The entire time that I agonized, Rami waited patiently. If I were smart, I'd make the obvious choice. However, as demonstrated throughout this entire series, I'm an idiot. A complete and total idiot. Eventually, I swallowed, then made my choice. I wished for my home, animals, and myself to be untouchable by those who intend to hurt any of us. For a fraction of a second, I could have sworn that Rami looked relieved, but that couldn't be right. As confident as he is, there was no way that he would be concerned about what choice I'd make, right? I must have imagined it. He nodded, his familiar, playful smile returning. Consider it done. He stood up. Well, I'm gonna steal your shower. By the way, are you up for going out? After the day I've had, a drink sounds nice. I'm sure you could use one as well. I agreed with him. As he walked away, I hurriedly told him where the towels were, also giving him permission to borrow my clothes if he didn't feel like donning his work attire again. Roughly 5 minutes after I heard the shower start, something crashed to the ground outside. My trash cans. I crept over to the window and carefully peeked through the blinds. There was movement in the darkness. My heart began to hammer in my chest as I saw that the Chupacabra was sniffing around outside, presumably looking for Connie. Rest assured, she was safely inside, snoozing peacefully on the carpet. One of the things that I found while researching this creature is that it isn't at all taken seriously, at least not online. Considering that the Chupacabra has been memed on so much, I understand if you can't find the concept of one being outside your home frightening. Just know that the funny goatsucker monster becomes significantly less funny when it's hunched over in your yard, its forked tongue tasting the air as it actively seeks the blood of your precious little pygmy goat. It stalked closer to the side of my house, its tongue guiding it along Connie's earlier path through the sliding glass door. It raised its sharp claws towards the glass. As soon as its right paw touched the door, it abruptly yelped and flinched. It bared its teeth at the door and growled, nursing its right paw as it scurried away. I could hear it continuing to yowl in the woods, the sound an eerie blend between the howls of a coyote and a baby crying. I had wished for my home to be untouchable. Rami clearly had interpreted that as literally possible. The Chupacabra's racket didn't cease even after Rami was done. As I kept staring through the blinds, he appeared behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder as he leaned over to see what I was looking at. He sounded pleased with himself when he commented, "It touched the house, didn't it?" "It sure did," I replied, "and I don't think it'll be doing it again anytime soon." He gave my shoulder a squeeze before leaning away from me. "Feel free to be as nosy as you like from now on. Maybe not too nosy, but you can push your luck a little more than you could before." On another note, it is with deep regret that I must report that Rami looks better in my clothes than I do. It was just one of my band t-shirts, the Who if you were curious, and a jacket, nothing special, but on him. Thankfully, he interpreted my staring as something else. If you're about to ask me to name 5 songs, it'll be an obnoxious experience for both of us. I handled it eloquently. "Go! No! You're taller than me, so I'm just amazed it fits so well." I blame you all, by the way. I was perfectly content to keep convincing myself that I was simply in awe of him until you all made me admit to myself that he's attractive, and now I can't not notice it. Rami's eyes narrowed. "Man, you really need to learn how to lie better." "Okay, fine," I snapped. I was just thinking about how I need to see them in concert sometime. He chuckled. That was better. Still not at all convincing, but I'll let you get away with it this time. Rami gave me a wink, which I shook my head at. Wanting to change the subject, I blurted out, So, did you have anywhere in mind for drinks? We don't have many options here, but Youngstown has a few hidden gems. Grabbing his sunglasses, he shrugged and told me he trusted me. I'm sure none of you will be astonished when I tell you that I got to test out Rami's protection during our outing. Rami noticed her first. He'd already gotten some questioning looks for wearing sunglasses so late indoors, so I didn't think much of her watching us until he pointed her out. What was bizarre is that when I looked at her straight on, she looked like an ordinary middle-aged woman permanently stuck in the 80s, complete with the big blonde hair, enjoying a drink by herself. However, when viewing her from the corner of my eye, she was massive. Her head was tilted, cheek resting on the ceiling. Rope-like arms dangled onto the floor, her hands not visible to me, assuming that she had them. She took on a gray hue spotted with blue that reminded me of pictures depicting human skin afflicted with severe frostbite. Rami playfully whispered, I think you should shoot your shot, lab rat. I frowned at him, noticing her obscenely elongated arm twitch at the edge of my vision. He smiled wickedly. Hey, if you won't go for her, I might just take her out from under you. Rami, stop, I hissed. Her arm moved again. I dared to glance at her in all her 80s glory and saw that she was staring daggers at me. Oh boy. The shithead chuckled. Seriously, man, I think she's into you. Why is he like this? And worst of all, why do I find it endearing? Why am I like this? I think being possessed gave me brain damage. Sleep deprivation also affects your judgment. Yeah, that's it. Sleep deprivation. Between the weird woman watching us and Rami being Rami, I was getting overwhelmed. I excused myself to the restroom to get some semblance of composure. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, wondering why I agreed to go out when I honestly just wanted to pass out when I heard the door creak open, then get stuck with a 1-foot gap. Reflexively, I glanced up, seeing nothing. Something told me to look out of the corner of my eye. On the floor was a blue hand, the boneless, ropey arm it was attached to slinking along the floor like a snake. You've got to be kidding. Heart beating in my ears, I jumped on top of the sink, pulling my legs up, using the corner of my eye to watch as the arm pulled itself further into the restroom. It just kept going. Could she make her arms longer at will? Her fingers flexed individually as the hand slithered towards me. Slowly, it raised itself up, reminding me of a king cobra as it rose higher off the ground. In the back of my head, I knew that the wish would protect me, but my panicked brain wasn't convinced. I watched, breath quickening as the hand rose ever higher. The fingers spread out wide, which was all the warning I had before it grabbed for me. I let out some sort of whimper and reflexively covered my head with my arms. Rubbery fingers grazed my arm, followed by a hot sizzle. The hand quivered violently, the arm it was attached to thrashing as it retreated back through the door, slamming it shut. Trembling, I slowly put my arms down as I realized that the wish had worked. I was safe. Carefully, shakily, I lowered myself back to the ground, trying to get my heart rate back to a normal tempo. Once I'd calmed down a bit, I went back into the bar. As I passed the long woman's table, she held her hand up to me, her face blank. Her skin was blistered and bright red as if she dipped it in hot grease. I shuddered, hurrying to rejoin Rami. There was a bright blue shot of something waiting for me. Rami had the same thing. As I was about to take it, he stopped me, turning to the long woman. She held a blue shot in her hand as well. She gave us a small smile and raised her glass. Rami did the same. Not knowing what this was about and afraid not to comply, I followed suit, but I think my smile looked more like a grimace. I don't know what was in that shot, but it was delicious. It reminded me of summer.